Hi, welcome to our presentation. Before we start, I have just posted a link to a form. On this form, there'll be some questions, totally anonymous, that will be really relevant and useful to our presentation. So we'd absolutely love it if you could just fill that in as best you can. Now, we're just going to quickly introduce ourselves while we give you a chance to fill in that form. I'm Edward. I'm an ancient history and archaeology student at Warwick. I'm in my third year, and you'll probably be able to tell this by my part of the live event.
My name is Sophia. I'm a second year history of art student.
Hi guys, my name is Noor and I'm a final year politics student.
And hi everyone, my name's Amir and I'm a third year biomedical sciences student. So just feel free to fill in our anonymous questionnaire. It's anonymous, so don't be shy. And it's really relevant to our presentation, so we'd love to get as many answers as we possibly can for it.
Also, there is some time designated at the end. In the event you want some questions, so don't ask any questions in this form. Just fill in what you can.
Right. Well, welcome everybody to our live stream where we will be talking about the Enigma of Humanity. We thought it'd be best if we do a little exercise beforehand just to get things flowing. Um, so, have you guys ever had an imaginary friend? Let's say a rock that you found maybe at the sea in your family trip.
Well, what we want you to do is think of a nice, round, juicy orange. We want you to give it a name, a backstory.
So, this is Samantha. She was born in 2020 among a batch of 12 seeds. She has always aspired to be a nurse, and to make this dream come a reality, she started working 9 to 5, like everybody else, at a food market. So, she nursed rotten apples back to health. One day, she woke up ready to go to work, and just like every other day, she got up in the morning, rolled across the street in a rush to get to the food market when bam, a car hit her and she died. The end. So that was a roller coaster of emotions in a little story.
Well, this kind of gives you the vague idea of our presentation, which is the desire of humanity to place and give humanity to objects or themselves. So, what I'll be discussing is how we can do. I'm going to start to discuss how in history people define their humanity. So earlier on the questionnaire, I asked if people thought these two items were from the same culture. Well, it ended up being that only 22.2% of you thought it was. But I'm just going to give you some backstory before I come back to that fact. So, the cylinder on the left is made by a Greek ruler called Antiochus. He's part of the Seleucid dynasty, and in roughly 250 BC, they control areas from Turkey all the way to Afghanistan, so quite a large area. Now, part of this ruling of this area is ruling over the former lands of Babylon, and this cylinder is done in an ancient Babylonian traditional style, with Babylonian cuneiform written around it. And as you can see, the cylinder on the right, the Cyrus cylinder, is actually by a prior rule of the region. Now, Antiochus is basically mirroring the ancient tradition of Babylon, as one can see by the writing of these two cylinders. They're very, very similar. So, overall, what we have here is Antiochus trying to change his own personal culture in order to legitimize himself, which actually most of you didn't realize, but it's actually a really fun fact about Antiochus himself. Now, this isn't even the only place where one can be seen to try and redefine their humanity in the ancient world. The other way is on the Great Altar of Pergamon. The Great Altar of Pergamon was created by the Attalid dynasty. The Attalid dynasty ruled in roughly modern day Turkey, and they were only half Greek. Now, this was a big problem for them because they were really self-conscious about this. I mean, if you were trying to engage in Greek tradition and in part of quite a big Greek world, you'd be quite self-conscious about this. So the Attalids countered this by, for example, this monument, they portrayed the ancient, famous Greek founding of their city, while also showing really iconic, famous Greek myths such as the Gigantomachy, thus portraying themselves as fully Greek even though they were only half Greek. Um, Neither is this the only time this monument can be seen in regards to people defining their humanity. This picture here is actually taken in Berlin, for in the 1900s, the Great Altar of Pergamon was taken by the German Empire and moved to Berlin. You're probably wondering why they did this. Well, during this period, the empires had a fascination of finding their place in the world and wanted to link themselves to these ancient, prestigious nations. So, the German Empire here is trying to redefine their culture and thus their humanity by portraying them linked to this ancient Greek regime. Neither is this the only place that this pole altar has been to. It also was taken to the Soviet Union after World War II and then before being moved back to Berlin. Now, as for other examples of humanity in history, I'm going to pass you on to Sophia.
Thank you. So, this need to redefine humanity is also seen in writings of influential philosophers and scientists during the 17th and 18th century. They considered a philosophical movement centered on free thinking, acceptance, and freedom. And this is known nowadays as the Enlightenment. And at this time, logic and knowledge start to be prioritized above other kinds of authorities, mainly religion and the monarchy. Therefore, this was an extremely revolutionary way of thinking into humanity. Ooh. So, we're able to see this curious and logical nature that mankind starts to have in works like this one right here, Joseph Wright of Derby's An Experiment on the Bird in the Air Pump. So this is the usage of dramatic lightning was intended to show how, in this case, science brought different reactions within people. So we're able to see at the beginning two seated men on the left showing feelings of wonder, and behind them, we have a pair who seem entranced by each other's eyes. And rather than the science experiment, which I relate a lot, science was not my cup of tea. If we continue on the painting, we see these two girls looking quite scared and worried, but they're being reassured by the man behind them. Finally, have the man on the right, and he's looking elsewhere completely uninteresting. So this painting shows how the public reacted to these new scientific discoveries, which overall we can just call change. So if you look closely, though, the scientist in the middle of the painting is looking directly at us, the public. So if you caught on to that, I'm going to give you 10 points because I didn't see that the first time I saw this painting. And so I asked in the form what kind of words came to mind. And let me quick, you found, so the experiment. Shocking, we have a lot of shocking, and I agree with you. Confusion, not sure, yeah, I agree as well, not sure what's really happening. Looks disturbing. I agree. Nowadays, you wouldn't do that. But so this painting shows the emotional reaction that we, us as humans, have to anything and everything, from wonder to fright. And it's exactly another part that makes us human. So, these new developments in the world shaped the following centuries, which are represented in many artworks. So these new ideas challenge traditional conventions, as we've seen, and the main change was the attention shift from Europe to the other continents, so the world. So this brought the notion of globalization. So I put here the definition for you if you're unfamiliar with the term. So this is a term used to describe how trade and technology have made the world a more connected place. Globalization is also related to the economic, which we won't be looking at that, and social changes, which we are a bit more interested, that have come as a result. So if we focus on European avant-gardists in the 20th century, we see how culture started to become an extremely important factor within our society. And we have here some examples. And artists started to show interest, as stated, in Africa, Oceania, and Latin America, and specifically their art. So if we focus on these two examples in here, so I have Les Demoiselles d'Avignon on the left and this Bingley mask on the right, we're able to see the similarities, specifically in the way Picasso painted the woman's face to look mask-like, slash the whole cubist, so which are very much influenced in African art, more particularly in this mask over here. Nevertheless, Western artists sometimes focused on stereotypes. In this case, we see African art stereotypes and not on the meaning behind the object, which was very important. So this brought a new phenomenon in which non-European artists started to challenge the beliefs that European artists had set on each corresponding continent, due to mainly the effects of colonialism. So this is a painting that I absolutely love. This is Wilfredo Lam, The Jungle. He is someone of Afro-Cuban and Spanish descent. And in his painting, he shows the influence that African art had while representing his Cuban colonial, in like this, the island's colonial past. So he does this by depicting life-size figures in a sugarcane field, and he's not just using masks as a feature that created shock, which is exactly what Picasso used. So we see how art's way of thinking started to change. So all of these examples are just to show you how over the course of history, humanity has developed in multiple disciplines. They have developed the mentality of human values that's never always changing. So I will be passed now to Noor.
Okay, so thank you, Sophia. I will be starting off by first defining what culture is. So culture is basically defined as a way of life that is transmitted from one generation to the next, and it consists of two basic elements, material and non-material. So material culture are physical objects, as Sophia and Edward just discussed, and now Amir and I will be focusing on non-material culture. So the concept of non-material culture is defined as the way of life of its members, the collection of ideas and habits that we share, we learn from generation to generation. And this concept of sort of sharing, teaching, and learning are very crucial here to understand the process whereby we become humans. And it is interesting to note that people are born into an existing cultural system, and to learn how to behave in that system is there are certain arrangements that need to be made for people to fit there. And we call this a process of socialization. And learning to behave in ways that accord with the sort of general understanding and expectations of others is a process that begins at birth. And we as humans, we never stop learning how to behave, mainly because our society is always changing, and we as people are always learning how to integrate ourselves within that community, how to learn and behave. So integrating into such culture systems is actually done through two types of socialization. So the first is primary socialization, and it basically occurs between you and the other people who you have a very close and intimate relationship with. For example, it could be your parents, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. The second type of socialization occurs with the individual and those people in their lives whom they are not very close with, whom they don't have an emotional connection with. And these kind of socializations can occur, let's say, within the education sector or religion or mass media. Now, there are three very important elements of socialization and culture that combine together to play a very crucial role in defining us as humans, making us humans. So the first is values, and which are a very important part of one's culture and society. And these are the actually beliefs that we have about what we consider that's important to us and what is important to our community. So to give you guys an example, it's that Japanese culture, for example, one of the core values of Japanese culture is respect, and bowing to others, particularly to your elders, is actually a sign of showing that respect. And earlier we asked you guys about what values are important to you in the Google Forms, and I think we have some really good responses. A lot of people said generosity, honesty, kindness, family. I agree with that. Equality and community. So these are all the values that make us humans. Norms, on the other hand, these are expected, socially acceptable ways to behave in any given situation. So, if we take the example of COVID-19, wearing face masks and social distancing actually became a new normal and is actually now a part of our everyday lives. Another thing that's very important for these systems is a social role, and that is something that represents the way that somebody is actually expected to behave. These are the parts that we as individuals play in our community, and we played many different types of roles in that community. So, for example, you could be a student as well as a friend, and at the same time, you could be a president of a social club. So, I mean, I would like to know what kind of roles do you guys play in your everyday lives simultaneously. So, please do let us know in the comments below. Um, and overall, acquiring and maintaining these values, norms, and social roles give us an identity whereby they form a part of us, basically. And these aspects of culture, they make us who we are. They help us to distinguish ourselves from others. From this, it can be said that culture helps us to adapt and learn. There was a research done by the University of Maine where they found that culture plays an important role in human evolution. It is by far a primary method for adapting to our environment and overcoming challenges better and faster, even than our genetics. So, and they also found that humans are experiencing this sort of special evolutionary transition in which the importance of culture, which you could call learned knowledge, practices, skills, are actually surpassing the values of genes as the primary driver of human evolution. They also found that culture is a very significant point for people to survive in this world. And it is not a surprise that they regard adaptation as one of the most essential ways of how culture really influences our lives. And by means of culture, we as individuals, we actually have a chance to gain necessary knowledge about the kind of world we live in. And such awareness helps us to really understand how to survive in this world, be very adaptive to different challenges and problems, and helps us to really coexist with others. And if you guys would like to know more about this, there's a very nice TED talk that very nicely summarizes how culture is really crucial for our behaviors. I will link it in the comments, so please do have a look if you're interested. Um, Overall, I would say that culture is a very powerful and essential means that we as humans use to be adapted to our surroundings, to interpret personal understandings of this world, and to really organize our personal thoughts and actions. I'm going to hand it over to Amir now.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about how culture plays an important role in molding us into the people we are today. The culture you're born into shapes our eating habits. So when we eat, where we eat, even how we eat. It also controls how we wear our clothes, how the sports that we play. In some countries, young teenagers or adults will fall in love and then they spend the rest of their lives together. In other cultures, it's the parents who choose for them. In some countries and cultures, if you say to somebody, I want you here at 2 p.m., it actually means 2 p.m. In other places, that means 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. So that's an example of my culture. I have the half Tunisian, half Indian. So yeah, we've always got those cultural things where we come late, and it's just how it is. And it also controls how you speak to somebody, whether that's your parents and family, a stranger, or a friend. Do you shake their hand? Do you give them 2 kisses on the cheek? So take a moment to reflect and feel free to share any unique features that your culture gives you in the comment section. So your culture environment shapes much of your outward behavior, but culture also affects your brain function, changing the way you think about and how you perceive the world. So the brain doesn't look any different. It's just the stored knowledge inside that is different. So culture doesn't just affect our perception, but it also affects our decision making as well. And that's made over in a changing environment. So, for example, when you choose what job you want in the future, how do you actually choose that? Well, you might think that it's actually you fully making that decision, but it changes depending on who you speak to, what you read about the job, what your parents want you to do as well. So sometimes we think we're making the decision, but it's actually the culture and experiences around us that make us do these decision making. So I'm now going to talk about some research, and it's about how people around the world see the world and make decisions and perceive. So perception is talking about how people see the world, and that's not just seeing it, but hearing it, smelling it, tasting it, and even the basic brain processes such as seeing lines. So I asked you earlier to fill out when filling out the form. I asked this question: which of the 2 lines are longer? And if you haven't had a chance to do the form, just look at it right now. So does the top line look longer, the bottom line, or are they the same? So this is from the Muller-Lyer study, and actually seeing from the results, 60% of you said that the bottom line is longer. I can actually reveal that the 40% of you who said it was the same were actually right, but I also got it wrong as well when I first saw it. So the upper horizontal line is often seen as being shorter than the bottom line, and that's because of the way how we see the angles. It's the angled lines that make the bottom one look longer than it is. So the Muller-Lyer study actually showed that people that grow up in environments such as a Western one, where there's buildings and specifically corners, are more likely to fall for the Muller-Lyer illusion. So that's us 60%. They thought that the bottom line was longer, and it was actually people more likely from cultures that lived in round houses or tents, such as those living in the rainforest, that were able to correctly identify that they were both the same length. So following from this, a researcher called Marshall Segal, who found that people that lived in these kind of rainforest environments and rural areas were able to actually sense crooked lines in a better way than people from urban areas. So this just shows that even though people are sensing the same exact thing, they're seeing it differently, which is quite extraordinary since that's just based off their culture alone. So another research project showed us that when adults in Japan and the United States are showed an underwater animated scene of where one large fish is swimming across amongst other small fish, the Japanese describe the scene with the relationship between the different objects in the picture, whereas the Americans were found to talk about the fish, the big fish first, and then maybe give maybe half the comments on the actual surroundings as well. So this research was then expanded, and the researchers then compared Americans who had been in Japan for some time and Japanese people who had been in the United States for some time. And they actually found that after a few years, the Japanese who had been in the United States were giving answers that were more similar to those who were actually from the United States. And the Americans that were living in Japan were giving answers that were closer to the original Japanese people. So they were actually changing their way, and that was just because of the culture that they were surrounded by. So one strong suggestion for this is that even living in an extended time, for an extended time in a new culture, can actually it can modify your sensations and your cognitive processes. So some points for you to think on. So how does culture affect your goals and plans? How does it affect your emotions? And what decision-making choices of yours are impacted by your culture? So as a conclusion, overall material and non-material cultures combine to make us humans. Each element complements each other. So we hope today that we've been able to provide you into an insight into where humanity originated from and how it has evolved and had a significant impact in our lives. We hope that you've been able to reflect and see why and how you are the human that you are today and where you fit in to the enigma of humanity.
And I would like to say a huge thank you to all of you for your time and listening to our presentation. We have left some time at the end for you to ask us any questions and any topic that you would like us to discuss. So we would love to hear your feedback. So please do scan the barcode and let us know what you think.
So just a quick explanation, those that have never used the QR code before, what you really need to do is just pull out your phone and go to your camera app, and you just sort of hold it over the QR code. You don't need to take a picture. It should automatically scan it and a link should pop up. And you just click that link and it should take you to our feedback form and the form that can ask questions. So
yeah, it seems like we've already got quite a few questions here. We probably only have time to discuss one due to the time limit, but Amir, does culture make us human? What do you think?
I think it really does, because I think that an interesting point, and I'm seeing that from just the form from the start. People are agreeing that culture even makes you more of a human than your actual genes do. So I think that the unique features that your culture brings is literally something that makes you more human than anything. But what about you, Noor? What do you think?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with it. And I think that with regards to culture, I mentioned three very important elements like norms, values, social roles. These are just three elements. There are other parts of culture that people could explore and come together to make you human. For example, I would say food is a huge part of my culture. Like I come from Pakistan, so it's all about food.
We all love food.
Clothing is a huge part of culture. I think language, so I think all these things come together to make you who you are, to make us humans. So I think that culture does make us human.
I'm gonna have to, I think, cut it off there because it seems like the time limit's about to run out. But I'm sorry we couldn't answer more questions. There were plenty there. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming to see our live event. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and we're grateful for your interaction in the forum. And we hope you can spare the time to fill in the feedback, as it'd be really helpful for us for future live events. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thanks
everyone.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye.